Conservation of biodiversity. Preservation mean protecting of biodiversity from human involvement and activities. Conservation mean protecting biodiversity for sustainable. Preservation mean protecting biodiversity from human involvement and activities. Conservation mean protecting biodiversity for sustainable. Biodiversity conservation can be observed in 3 levels. They are conservation of genetic diversity. Second one, conservation of species diversity. Third one, conservation of ecosystem diversity. These are the 3 levels for the conservation of biodiversity. The above 3 ecosystems are interrelated. Currently, a species-based conservation approach is being developed. Other adopts habit-based conservation are being followed. The above 3 types of levels based on the species-based conservation. The species-based conservation, habit-based conservation gives good result for the conservation of biodiversity for a long time. From that, first one is conservation of genetic diversity. Strategies and policies are developed to take the population as the unit for conservation of genetic diversity of a species. Strategies and policies are developed to make a conservation of diversity to take the population as a unit for conservation of genetic diversity of a species. All 3 types of genetic conservation strategies and measures must be compatible for the practice of care conservation objects. Depending on 3 types of times, they are: one is fixed population in short time can be avoided from extinction with proper management. So fixed population in short time can be avoided from extinction without proper management. Some people's, some populations developed in uncomfortable environment. If we provide comfortable environment, it gives instant result from extinction of living organism. Extinction of living organism with proper management. And second type is the population can also continue the ability to adapt to changes. The population can also continue to the ability to adapt the changes. What are the changes in this? Ecological factor, changes of environment, changes of pollutions, changes of temperatures, changes of soil content. These all changes are adapted by population. So they can survive their life on the location. And third type is the capacity of the population in speciation can be continued. If the population are adapted changes of aquatic environment or mesophytic environment or xerophytic environment, that capacity of the population in speciation can be continued to increase their population. Which populations are adapted changes, ecological adapted changes, that populations are in speciation. Speciation means increase their size of population. Size of population can be continued in the location. The first goal take less time, it mainly few days to few decades. Mean the fixed population in a short time can be avoided from the extinction with proper management. It is a first goal. It takes less time, that is few days to few decades. And second ambition mean the population can also continue the ability to adapt the changes. It is the second ambition. Practice to be take a few decades to a few million years of time. And the next third one is the speciation can be identified as a part of to create biodiversity and genetically effective population size. So these three are interlinked. These three are interlinked with each other. Three types. All three types of genetic conservation strategies are interlinked. First strategy, second one, third one. These three are interlinked for the conservation of genetic diversity to make a good population size. The second one is conservation of species diversity. Species diversity plays major role biologically, conceptually, and legally in conservation. Many people are already aware that biodiversity is a number of species. The conservation of species depend on habitat or ecosystems. The most frequently endangered keystone species, example banyan ravi trees, are conserved on the basis of habitat or ecosystem conservation. Dominant species, rare species are identified and they are protected in ecosystem. If the species are protected in ecosystem, if we are also indirectly protected the genetic diversity. If we protected one species, if we protected one dominant species or rare species or endangered species, automatically the species genetic material also conserved. It is a main point for the species diversity of conservation. Mainly three types of classes of species. First class, in this class, threatened species should be also be given priority in care. So in this first priority, what are the first priority? It is threatened species, which are in endangered, which are gives warning to environment. That threatened species should be conserved in priority first. The principles of priority are cladistic priority. Cladistic priority means family tree. Which plants are having important values based on the family history. So they are principles of priority. And second class is species can be preserved. Species can be preserved. Example, forest plants, medicinal plants, ornamental plants, food plants, fodder plants. If these all plants are important for the human life, if we protected forest plants, medicinal plants, ornamental plants, food plants, and fodder plants to be preserved, to be conserved for a long time in the species diversity conservation. It is also serves as a plant source, plant resource for reproduction system. If we protected the above second class type of plants, we are compulsory helps in the population, mean reproduction of system of plants. And third class is divided into types. One is indicator species. Species that are sensitive to pollution, human intervention, geological or ecological sustainability, and other fluctuations are called index species or indicator species. These species are mainly helps to human beings. It indicates the pollution will be changed. So that plants gives message to the peoples. If increasing of pollutant in the ecosystem, that pollutants are more sensitive to the species. That species are called index or indicator species. The pollutants may be interhuman or human interventions, ecological insustainability, or other fluctuations. Then second species of third class plants, umbrella species. The umbrella species are that occupy an unusually large space in the ecosystem and protect other species. Example, tiger living in the wild in main part, that is core part. If core part is protected directly, indirectly, living organisms are protected. All the living organisms are protected in the core part. If we protected one tiger in ecosystem, that tiger is protected core part. The core part containing all types of food chain living organisms. The food chain living organisms are indirectly protected by the umbrella species. In this umbrella species, we protect one species. It occupies large space of ecosystem. So the tiger will protect it. Automatically, the tiger is protected core part of living organisms. And in plant kingdom, banyan tree also. And keystone species. Keystone species are those that protect other important species while preserving the environmental integrity of community. Example, frog, bee, hummingbird, banyan, ravi, cactus species. These are important for the ecosystem services. So they are mainly play major role in the environmental factors like keystone species and attractive species. Attractive species are generally attractive at the social values, socially or culturally important. They are having different types of attractive structure of the plant pots like flowers, shoots, roots, maybe fruits, like these are. And recreational species. Recreational species, these are also called Vinoda Jatala, enjoyment plants. The species that collect, breed, and observed are called recreational species. They are relaxed species. They give relaxation to the ecosystem. These are important for the third class of the species protection. And the last conservation is conservation of ecosystem diversity. Some suggested that genetic or ethnic based conservation of living organisms in an area is called ecosystem diversity conservation. As a result, relevant ecosystem and important habitats are preserved. If we protected one ecosystem, that ecosystem is based on the genetic levels, ethnic based levels, the conservation more suggestible for the ecosystem conservation of diversity. If an habitat is to be preserved, the endemism of the species in the habitat must be ensured. Endemism means the local place of living organism, native place of living organism. Native place of living organism is also called endemism. In that endemism places, the plants, the animals having comfortable environment. If that endemism is also called ecosystem. If you protected endemism, ecosystem diversity, automatically the species are protected in that location of ecosystem. There are deforestation, throughout the threat index and ecosystem conservation based approach as impact on conservation and establishment of protected areas. Deforestation through the threat index and ecosystem conservation based approach has an impact on ecosystem conservation and establishment of protected areas. Ecosystem based is not yet being done here because some reasons are here: a lack of proper habitat, ecosystem classification. Second one is endangered species not yet included in the protected areas. Yet there little awareness on ecosystem in the world. These are the some faults in the conservation of ecosystem diversity. Now, how to conserve it? Principles are given for the conservation. Objective of biodiversity conservations, protection of biodiversity, conservation or conserving food and fodder woody plants. So these are main chapters, topics for the conservation of ecosystem. If we protected one ecosystem, we protected one species. If we protected species, we protected genes. So the genetic conservation, species conservation, ecosystem conservations are interlinked. So if we protected ecosystem, all species are conservated. If we conservated ecosystem, all species are conservated. If we conservated ecosystem, all species genetic materials are conservated. So these three are interlinked with levels of conservation of biodiversity.